everybody, welcome back to Think Outside the Board. This week's episode of the Kickstarter Weekly is covering games that are going to complete their funding from September 13th through the 19th. The crazy thing is, I only have one game to talk about in this video this week, and then in the whole rest of the video, I'm only going to talk about one other game, so it's just two games. The reason for that is I didn't back anything from the last videos, so there's no games that I personally pledged from the last period. Also, nothing's arrived. You know, there's this huge global shipping crisis right now and everything's pushed back, so there's no acquired games this period either. And I've actually only played one game this period. So we're going to talk about the one game that's funding, which is Wild Serengeti, and then we're going to talk about the one game I played, although I played it 8 times. So I did play it quite a bit, and I actually was trying to play that game to sort of finish it off to be able to make a video, so it backed me up a little bit this week in terms of video production as well. But we'll talk about that when we get there. So first up, currently running Kickstarters. The only game on the list this week is Wild Serengeti, and that game is going to fund on September 17th. Now, when they launched the campaign, they set their minimum required funding goal at $20,000. They're currently sitting at $142,000, so that's pushing past 7 times their minimum required funding goal. Now, this is a game for 1 to 4 players. It's supposed to play in about 45 to 120 minutes, so a little bit less than an hour to 2 hours. So far from what I've seen, it looks like the gameplay is on the level of medium-light complexity, and the risk level for this campaign I'm going to set at medium-high. Now, this game is a pattern building game. It has engine building, it has set collection. It's got really cool components. It's got these animal meeples, and it takes place on the plains of the Serengeti. So you're going to be moving around these very cool, very diverse, colored animal meeples. There's even kind of like a tree in the game that looks sort of like the Everdell tree. I mean, it's not the same, but it's kind of similar. So because of all these components that look really good, the game's going to have some nice table presence. I also really like the direction that they took the gameplay in this one. So you're dealing with wild animals, but you're not hunting them or anything like that. You are a wildlife photographer, you're making a documentary movie, and you're trying to get different pictures of the animals. So you'll essentially have contracts that will tell you what the pictures need to look like, and then you'll be using various mechanisms to move animals around. I suppose you could look at that element of the game as kind of area control, because in order to score that, you need to get certain animals moved into various areas. And the idea is that once you do that, you film a scene, and then you've got a scene for your documentary film. And then you'll be doing this over and over, kind of collecting all these different scenes. And the idea is that whoever is the most successful will have the highest, scoring collection of scenes that look the best, look the coolest. And they will, in effect, have made the best documentary feature with kind of the most substance to it. It's a very interesting way of portraying the theme, and it reminds me of some video games where I've seen something similar done. Because a lot of video games are shooters, where you're shooting things, but you don't have to shoot everything. There's a couple games out there that I know. One of them is Beyond Good and Evil, where your character that you're playing, she's a photographer. So instead of actually killing animals, you use her camera, to take pictures of things. No Man's Sky did a similar thing where you were trying to take pictures of certain creatures. And I've always really liked that design tweak in games to make something very kind of involving, but not necessarily representing killing. I don't necessarily mind killing in games, but it doesn't always have to be the thing that you do. When you're dealing with the Serengeti, you're dealing with wild animals, many of whom are endangered. I think it's a breath of fresh air to have this kind of documentary film design and mechanic in the game. So it looks really neat to me. It has cool table presence. I like the idea behind it. It just looks like a very smart, fun design that could really win over a lot of gaming groups. And because it doesn't look too complicated, I think it may actually be lighter than, say, Everdell or Wingspan, but certainly at least in that club. I don't think it will be heavier than those games. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes on to have a similar success to those games. So let's talk about the team of people who created this game. It's designed by Gunho Kim. He's really only designed one game before, that's Shalia Warring States, although there was a follow-up expansion that was funded through Kickstarter, and that's kind of still in the pipeline to deliver. So he's got one game fully delivered, and then he's got an expansion that's kind of in the pipeline. And essentially that's true for the publisher, which is really his company. And that's the reason that the risk for this one is set at medium high. So it's not high because he's actually completed and delivered a Kickstarter, and he has another Kickstarter that is kind of delivering pending. So he's not completely green. He's actually done this before. And his game, Shalia Warring States, has actually kind of gotten more positive and positive reviews the longer that it's been out. And I think once that expansion delivers its Kickstarter, you're going to see a lot of good reviews and a lot more positive buzz about this designer and this publisher. So I can't quite elevate the publisher to medium low in terms of the risk. They've only delivered one game, but they've done a good job. They've got that expansion in the pipeline. And so I think they have earned that medium high status, an upgrade from being a high risk. Now there's two artists on this game. One is named Hani Chang. And the interesting thing is that Hani Chang does not have any other art in a published game before. However, Hani Chang was actually a co-designer on Shalia Warring States. So they're not involved with the design on this game, but they are involved with the art. The other credited artist is Sophia Kang, and she did the art on Shalia Warring States. And then finally, the publisher is called Bad Comet, and again, they published Shalia Warring States. So really, the whole team on this is kind of a carryover from Shalia Warring States and the expansion to Shalia. Now, in terms of pledges, there's only one pledge level in this game. It makes it very simple, and it's going to keep this video even shorter, and that is a pledge for $52 for Wild Serengeti. That's it. You're either going to back that level or you're not backing the campaign. However, I'm going to talk about a couple add-ons, especially because there are no other pledge levels. There are upgraded wooden tokens that you can get, and they will replace the cardboard resources in the game. Those are $14. So if you want those, it's going to sort of deluxify your game, and you can add them on for $14 in the Pledge Manager. You can also order sleeves through the campaign for the game. It's $12, so that's an additional cost. It's also an add-on. That will give you 230 sleeves, which is going to be enough for everything in the game. And then finally, you can get a second set of animal meeples for the game. They're called Animeeples. Now, if you want to get that second set, it's going to be $8. Again, you can do it as an add-on, and that will include all of the various animal meeples, or they're calling them Animeeples, that were unlocked through stretch goals. Now, there's no reason to have a second set of animals. The only reason that people would want to do that is because they look cool, and they do look cool, and they're very colorful, and they look very neat. So there may be a case where someone just wants the Animeeples, or maybe they want a second set to put on their desk at work or like a bookshelf at home. And I think this is a case where you don't always need to have merchandise in your Kickstarters. Some people have a lot of really unnecessary, crazy extra merchandise. But I think this is the exact situation where it's good to have this merchandise. It's very cool, it looks very well produced, and it is genuinely something that I think people may want to have extra sets of because they do look so good. So in this case, this may be a thing where you do want to add on this cosmetic add-on just to have a second set of these meeples, just for whatever reason. So the base pledge is $52. If you want those upgraded wooden tokens, that's a $14 add-on, so that would raise your total cost to $66. And then if you wanted the sleeves for $12, that will raise your total to $78. I'm just gonna state that total because that is basically the highest total that you would be paying for everything gameplay related. And then if you wanted to buy that sort of add-on for the meeples, I'd say cosmetic add-on, but it's not even cosmetic because they're not used in the game. I mean, you could have them as a backup as replacement parts, but you don't use them in the game. So they're not really a cosmetic add-on, they're just an extra that you might want to have for whatever reasons, for display purposes. But in terms of actual things you're going to be using to play the game, the max you could be pledging, if you're doing the wooden tokens and the sleeves, is $78. And that's kind of adding on to that $52 base pledge. Now there's going to be shipping as well, but it's different for every country. There's even different shipping rates in the US depending if you're in Puerto Rico, Alaska, or Hawaii. So I don't mention those shipping rates anymore. Just know the base pledges are what they are, and then you need to figure out what the shipping is. And then finally, Wild Serengeti is looking to deliver in July 2022. We hope that's going to happen. There's a lot of worldwide shipping delays right now. Hopefully they will be resolved in another 6 to 9 months, and hopefully Bad Comet can get the game delivered when they are shooting for, which is July 2022. So that wraps up that section, and as I mentioned at the top, there are no pledged games this video, so there's no section for that. There's no acquired games, so there's no section for that. However, there is going to be the played game section. And there's only one game, which I played 8 times. Run the little intro for it. And so that game is Chronicles of Crime 1400. And my fiance had just played that. We'd played through all the cases, but she hadn't wanted to go back and kind of replay everything to just figure out every little secret. So it was something that I kind of needed to do on my own. I now have done that. I have 100%ed all of the 5 cases in the game. That means you will probably actually see a full teach and review from me very shortly on that. And I also just talked about Chronicles of Crime 1400 in my Games of the Month for July 2021, so you can go to that video and hear me talk a little bit more about it there. But I will say Chronicles of Crime 1400 is a game where you're solving cases, so there is limited replayability. Once you fully understand the case and figure out the solution, you're done. So it's a scripted case, there's no randomization. It is kind of fixed. Now, there is a tutorial in the game and 4 additional cases. The average case will probably take you about 2 hours to play on a first play. And then if you want to go back and kind of figure out the other things, the things you missed, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, it may take you an hour to 2 hours for each additional play. And depending on the complexity of the case, you may or may not need extra sessions. So for the tutorial and maybe the first or second case after that, you might be able to 100% it in one play. For the last 2 or 3 cases, you may need to play it a few times through. I think most of the cases I probably played 2 to 3 times, and then the last case I think I had to play maybe a half a dozen times, just because there were a couple things that were difficult to figure out exactly which question the game wanted in the quiz at the end. So there were like several possibilities, and I played through the game a few times and tried a few different things. But it does have limited replayability. It is gorgeous to look at. It is very intelligently designed. The scripts and the writing behind the game is very, very well done. And I think the logic behind how the design works and how the cases work and sort of the scripting in the game and how certain things may or may not happen when you're in certain locations, that's all done very, very well. So I am now done with the game. I will have that full teach and review done early next week at latest. And then I'm actually looking forward to moving on to Chronicles of Crime 1900. And I have 100%ed, I think, the first 2 cases, and I have 3 left in that game. And I'm really liking 1900 as well. I think I'm liking it more than 1400, and I'm liking some of the little changes that they make. So I'm looking forward to playing the last 3 cases in that and finishing that one out. But if you like those kinds of games, if you like sort of limited replayability where you're solving a scripted case, think about it like an unlock game or an exit game or Time Stories or Detective of Modern Crime board game or Detective City of Angels or Deadline. All of those games are kind of limited in what they're doing because there are definitive answers to the cases and they're not randomized. But all of those games, I think Chronicles of Crime 1400 is definitely a leader. Really well done, really good game. Finally, let's talk about what's coming production-wise for the channel. So at the time that you're watching this, you should already also see live on the channel the July Games of the Month video. Starring Embarcadero, which is a great game, and I'm going to be having another video on that coming out soon. So over the rest of the weekend, you will see videos popping up for Embarcadero, Kemet Blood and Sand, and Shasen. And all three of those videos will be first impressions videos. And then you'll also see a full teach and review for Chronicles of Crime 1400. Now, there's really not too much to teach for that game. It's very intuitive and self-explanatory. So that full teach and review won't be that long. I will go over quickly the components and kind of how the game plays, but it doesn't need to be nearly as involved as the teaches in a lot of games. And then I will just give you my full thoughts on all four of the cases and what I thought about them without any spoilers. So all four of those videos should be hitting over the weekend, running into early next week. Next week, I'll be working on my next batch of videos, which will probably include import-export, Stronghold Undead, and then from there I might go to maybe Brew and Hadrian's Wall. But I think all you'll probably see hitting next week will be import-export and possibly Stronghold Undead. There will be another Kickstarter weekly at the end of the week, although it looks to be another very short one. I will probably only be featuring 2 currently running Kickstarters. I may have like one arrival, and I guess you'll have to tune in to see whether or not I personally back Wild Serengeti. And I'll probably have a few played games. So it'll be a little bit longer than this, but not a huge video. And then the week after that, that Kickstarter weekly is looking to be pretty big because there are a lot of games that launched this week that will be finishing up for that video. Also that week, in 2 weeks' time, you will see my August Games of the Month video. August is over, and I already know which games are going to be featured in that video. I just have to film it, but it's kind of in a production line right now. And then during the first week of October, you'll get the September Games of the Month video. And from then, it'll just be monthly, and each Games of the Month video will premiere during that first week of the following month. But getting 3 videos done in the next 4 weeks or so will catch me up. And I have some very good games that I'll be talking about in 2 weeks, as well as the really good games that I talked about this week. So be looking for those videos, be looking for my 3 first impressions videos, and the Chronicles of Crime 1400 teach and review if you're interested in what I have to say about that game on a deeper level. Other than that, thank you very much for watching this. Please consider liking the video and subscribing. And once you've done that, if you want to be notified whenever I publish future videos, you can also hit the alarm bell. So I hope everybody out there is having a great week and you have a good weekend ahead of you. Hopefully you can play some games. And let me know what you think about Wild Serengeti. Is that something that you've been thinking about backing? Are you going to consider backing it now? I think it looks really cool. Thanks again. Have a great weekend. And keep your eyes peeled for my next bunch of videos that are going to be trickling in over the next several days.